Swami Supananda ji and distinguished members in the attendance. Today, after a long time, we are having a live lectures under the Vivekananda circle, science circle. And I will just make a short introductions to the speaker. And you have seen, the flyer, so you know most of it anyway. But still, formally, I should just introduce him. He's Dr. Tilak Bera. His background was actually, and I would not guess, I guess, he was a medical doctor. And he was in the military, for a long time, took retirement, and then he started to follow his own, own interest. And as one of them is that to show that how the migrations worked all over the world, in the past. And of course, during British period, the British wanted us to believe that everything came, we are just one of the worst ones. They wanted to destroy our self-confidence. So they said all kinds of things, and we are just propagating that history all throughout the period before independence. Even after independence, we are doing the same thing. Even now, a lot of things are written here by Indians which say the same thing, that Aryans came to India from outside. But that's not true. That many accounts would show that that's not true at all. And there are many results are coming out as a result of the new investigations. But still, many of us in India, they keep telling the same thing. Aryans came from west to here to teach India. And so this Dr. Bera, and some other people also actually, but Dr. Bera individually, was interested and started roaming around various places in the world, at his own expense mostly. And he took a lot of good pictures and evidences he collected to show what Swami Vivekananda said, more than 100 years ago, that we are the Aryans, that Swami Vivekananda said. It's all false things where they're saying that we are not the Aryans. From here, we went outside, whatever it is. So that's the one. So he has some evidences now that he collected. And there are other evidence also available with him of the migrations at different places, by also some other authors also saying the same thing. And what he's found out, at least some evidences that we'll be talking about today, which is that how we started going towards the West, how Indian culture, as well as Indians, migrated towards the West. So that's the one he tried to chronicle and write in his book, which is India in Egypt. And in the subtitle, actually, you saw that the details of the talk, or some hints about the talk. So I would not take much time because we're already late a little bit. So I'll request actually Dr. Bera, to give the talk, and we'll be looking forward to his talk. But before that, just we'll, on the behalf of the Institute, that we'll give him some token of our appreciation.
A very good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, let me express my gratitude to the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Golpark, for giving me this platform to discuss about the pre-recorded period of India and that of Bengal as well as that of the world. I'm particularly grateful to Secretary Maharaj, Swami Supananda ji, for giving me this opportunity. I'm also thankful to Dr. S.K. Lahiri for helping me. Let me come to the topic straight away. recently I have authored a book titled India in Egypt. As the title suggests, that it is all about an intense connectivity between the Indian civilization and the Egyptian civilization. In fact, I'm making an effort to establish that the Egyptian civilization was established by the Indian origin people. This is quite an unbelievable concept at this stage, because in the meantime, what we have been taught in our academic curriculum does not encourage such a line of thinking. But it is also possible that what we have been taught may not be correct in every sense. I think we have the responsibility of establishing the pre-recorded period of India on the basis of ground evidences, what we see all around. And we have to incorporate scientific evidences which has emerged in the last 2 or 3 decades in almost every subject, especially in the subject of genetics and archaeology. I am compiling information from every possible scientific source and also including our information from our ancient texts like Rig Veda to arrange my narrative. In the process, a very different, a very new picture has emerged about the ancient past of India. It may appear again unbelievable, but the ground evidences suggest such a sequence of events. It appears that Indian origin people had traveled from India to distant lands like Mediterranean coast, Egypt and Greece, and they established civilizations there. At a later date, they have also come back to India, which I have referred here as reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities back to India. However, we have to arrange events starting from the arrival of the anatomical modern human. We actually, the Homo sapiens, are the anatomical modern human who came from Africa to India about 65,000 years ago. If we carefully observe, we see various evidences all around which are extremely unique to India. We see them, but we do not go into the details regarding their the history. That is, how did it come here in India? Now, there is an opportunity of arranging all these things, and we are, in this book also, I'm making an effort to arrange that. Now, if we see it took me almost 20 years to arrange my narrative, collecting evidences from every corner of the Indian subcontinent. In the process, I wrote a few books describing my experience of exploration of the remote areas like Northeast India, Ladakh, pre-Portuguese Goa, Andaman, Nicobars, and so on. If we see regarding the unique features what we see in India, on the anthropological front we see Aboriginal tribes in Andamans like Jaroa Onge Sentinelese in the Andaman archipelago, but we do not go into the details. How did they reach there? I mean, obviously 40,000 years back they have M31, 32 mtDNA haplogroups, so they dissociated from the mainland about 40,000 years ago. Obviously 40,000 years ago they did not travel by ship or by air. So how did they reach there? Did they walk into Andaman? Even that we do not discuss. Now there are other anthropological features, like we see a large number of dark complexion tribes south of Vindhya Parvat. Who are these people? Why don't we see dark complexion tribes in northern India or northeast India? In fact, we don't see these dark complexion tribes anywhere in the rest of Eurasia. Are these people pre-glacial period population? Because they are pre-glacial period population, they have a completely different genetic identity. Maybe because of that, in a very recent genetic study it has been found that the people living north of Vindhya Parbat and south of Vindhya Parbat have different genetic identity, and they have been referred as ancestral South Indian and ancestral North Indian. Is it possible that the people who live south of, some people who live south of Vindhya Parbat actually belong to pre-glacial period? They are pre-glacial period population or pre-glacial period AMH, and those who live north of Vindhya Parbat are post-glacial period population who went all over the rest of Eurasia. In the archaeological front, we see that there are many temples which has come up relatively recently, but we do not know the history of their origin. We see the largest archaeological temple of Eastern India dedicated to sun god. Now, at that time, along with the, there were more popular god and goddesses in Eastern India. Then why the largest temple is dedicated to sun god? Now, the dynasty which sponsored this temple, that is the Eastern Ganga dynasty, also sponsored the construction of the Hori temple of Jagannath, that is Puri temple. Now, is it possible that they had an ethnic connectivity and the religious influence with Egypt, where Horus or Hori and sun god or Ra were two principal deities there? Now, in the animal symbols, we see animal symbols almost in every archaeological structure all over the world. We see these animal symbols associated with all our deities. Now, animal symbols like lion and horse definitely did not originate in India. They probably originated in Mediterranean coast, Egypt or Europe. And in all probability, each of these animal symbols possibly represent a human fraternity. Animal symbol is a very, very interesting and important subject. It can easily be considered as a subject by itself, and it needs a very serious and a very thorough study. Animal symbol can actually give us information about the prehistoric human migration. And in fact, in the Rig Veda also we find both these onward and reverse migration animal symbols frequently mentioned. There is one more subject, like the deities of West Bengal are quite different from the popular deities, I should say. The popular deities of West Bengal are quite different from the deities of the rest of the country. In fact, these deities are quite different from some of the adjacent states like Bihar and Jharkhand. How come the deities of this place is completely different from the rest? Like Kali standing on Shiva, or Durga associated with 4 children, or Lokhi associated with owl is not very popular. Lokhi is a very popular deity all over the country, but you won't find Lokhi with owl anywhere else. In some place, on some occasion, we find Lokhi associated with elephant. We call that Gajolakshmi. Otherwise, Lokhi is generally portrayed as sitting on the lotus throne. Now, this sort of has happened, but we don't know how to explain this. Now, on the linguistic front, we see that some of the Pali-speaking kingdoms emerged pretty early, and they have been referred to as Shodosho Mahajanapadas. Now, probably they got established very early, but they got recorded on 6th century BC when Pali script arrived, and they got recorded in the Buddhist and Jain scriptures in Pali language. Is it possible that the Pali-speaking reverse migration fraternity came back prior to the arrival of the Sanskrit-speaking reverse migration fraternity from Europe? Is it possible that the Pali-speaking reverse migration fraternity came back from Red Sea region and established the Shodosho Mahajanapadas? Closer home, we have another observation. We see the Bengali dialect of Chittagong and Sylhet quite different. It is not understood by people of the neighboring region, including those who live in Dhaka, let us say. Is it possible that these people were Bengali-speaking reverse migration fraternity who are coming back from a distant land? Is it possible that during their stay at a distant place, they had absorbed local words in their language? That is why that dialect has become completely different. There has to be an explanation for all these observations. There is a need to arrange the pre-recorded period of India in a very meticulous manner. Unless we record or unless we understand the pre-recorded past of India, we will never be able to arrange our history properly. I would like to show you a video how the history of India unfolds when the probable events of the pre-recorded past of the Indian civilization is arranged on evidence-based manner. Video.
Though Indian civilization is discussed along with other ancient civilizations of the world, like the Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Egyptian and Greek civilizations, it could be much older than the rest. Presently, the Indian civilization is considered 5,000 years old and its origin is explained rather vaguely linked with Indo-Aryan migration. Discovery of several newer archaeological sites like Mehergarh, Gulf of Kambat Cultural Complex, Lahura Deva and Pumpuhar suggest that this civilization is at least 10,000 years old. It is also possible that the Indian civilization played the role of a mother in the origin of other ancient civilizations. Evidences suggest that Indian origin fraternities had traveled to distant lands long ago to establish other ancient civilizations. At a later date, a large number of them returned to India for various reasons. This reverse migration phenomena is popularly known as Indo-Aryan migration. In fact, reverse migration of Indian origin fraternities resulted in the collapse of all the other ancient civilizations of the world almost at the same time. As such, mysteriously, we do not find any reason for the collapse of other ancient civilizations. On the other hand, Indian civilization not only continues, but they also constructed several archaeological marvels which are comparable to the best archaeological monuments of the world. Excellent skill in stone cutting and creating stone sculptures remains at the center of such constructions. It is possible to establish the above view when we arrange the genetic, archaeological, linguistic and cultural evidences in a meticulous manner. I intend to initiate a discussion in that direction with available ground evidences and analysis of available scientific data. My first endeavor is to establish that the Egyptian civilization was developed by the Indian origin fraternities. At this juncture, we have to consider that AMH or anatomically modern humans, scientifically known as Homo sapiens sapien, originated in Africa about 2 lakh years ago. They arrived in India about 65,000 years ago following their out of Africa move. They possibly followed a southern route known as the Great Coastal Migration. Though there are many theories regarding the early migration of AMH, this is the most accepted view. In all probability, AMH reached Andamans from the Bengal-Myanmar coast. They continued their eastward journey farther all the way to Australia. It is possible that India served as the intermediate host of AMH and they continuously lived there for 65,000 years. They reached Europe much later, about 45 to 50,000 years ago, possibly from India during an interglacial period. AMH could survive in India during both the glacial and interglacial periods because of availability of favorable terrains. During the glacial period, they lived south of the Vindhya Parvat, that is the green territory in the map, in eastern, central and southern India, while during the interglacial period, they also spread to northern and western India, the blue territory in the map. The presence of a large number of dark complexion tribes in India suggests the continuous survival of AMH here, whereas absence of any such human diversity in Europe and rest of Asia suggests the survival of AMH in these regions only during the interglacial period. Though AMH reached Europe and northern Asia during every interglacial period, they could not survive there during the severe weather of glacial maximum and became extinct. We have evidences of extinction of Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Siberia 40,000 years ago during a previous glacial maximum. It is possible that Indian origin people spread to other regions of Asia and Europe during the interglacial period once the trans-Himalayan migration was possible. One route descended from Kailash and followed the Makran coast to reach the Horn of Africa and Nile Delta, where the Egyptian civilization developed. Both the Indus Valley civilization and Sumerian civilization emerged on this route, while the other route from Mount Kailash went through Asia Minor, now Turkey, to Europe. The Mesopotamian civilization emerged on this route. Presently, the pre-recorded period is thus arranged on the basis of various subjects like anthropology, archaeology, ancient texts, including religious texts and mythology, spread of languages, culture and social customs, and so on. As the events related to the pre-recorded period in Europe are few, it is generally discussed under two broad heads: Paleolithic period and Neolithic period. However, as AMH lived in India continuously for 65,000 years, while arranging the pre-recorded period of India, in addition to the above subjects, we need to consider other subjects as well. These newer subjects in relation to India need to be identified and appreciated. I intend to discuss the pre-recorded period of India under the following heads: origin of several fraternities who identified themselves with various animal symbols, events related to glacial and interglacial periods, a probable period of matriarchal culture, the spread of Indian origin fraternities to distant lands, various possible migration routes and trans-Himalayan migration, reverse migration of Indian origin fraternities from Egypt and Europe. It is possible to establish the evidences of origin of newer AMH fraternities on the eastern coast of India. It is also possible to establish the migration path of Indian origin fraternities to distant lands. A number of animal images are seen in every archaeological structure in India and in all the ancient civilizations of the world. It is unlikely that they serve a decorative purpose only. In all probability, animal symbols like naga, tiger, lion, elephant, fish, turtle, primate each represented a human fraternity in the ancient period. When two such fraternities united to form a fusion fraternity, it was represented by a fusion animal image. These fusion animal images are not understood and are generally described as the mythical images because no such animal exists in nature. A winged lion, possibly representing an ethnic union of lion and avian fraternities, is seen in India, Greece and Egypt. It establishes its widespread distribution in three ancient civilizations of the world. This symbol was created in Greece and Egypt 2000 to 5000 years ago, which has remained in the archaeological structures as images frozen in time. However, in India, such images were created till very recently. Another fusion animal image seen in Narmer palette of Egypt has the face of a tiger, neck of a serpent or naga and body of a primate. Naga, Bag and primate were the three early Indian origin fraternities which migrated to distant lands. As the Narmer palette images signify the union of Upper and Lower Egypt by Narmer, the first king of Egypt, this image suggests that it was established by an union of three Indian origin fraternities. Another interesting composite animal image in Majuli Island, Assam shows features of the elephant, lion, avian and horse swallowing a fish. This possibly depicts formation of an allied force to destroy the ruler of a territory represented by the fish. Several newer AMH fraternities originated in India and they adopted various animal images as their ethnic symbols. The coastal dwellers fraternities identified themselves with the naga, fish and turtle symbols, while the forest dwellers or the hunter-gatherers identified themselves with the naga, bag, primate and elephant symbols. It is possible to arrange the animal symbols meaningfully, establishing their interpersonal relationships. It appears that these animal symbols served as vahans of the Indian deities belonging to various fraternities. In the Egyptian civilization, however, deities are seen with their head replaced by the head of the animal to which fraternity the deity belonged. Over a period of time, Naga descendant fraternities adopted the fish and avian symbols. Indian origin fraternities often adopted newer animal symbols to represent a transformed fraternity in a distant land. The tiger fraternity adopted the lion image, and thus we find both tiger and lion as the Vahan of Durga. I have drawn a flow chart to arrange the ancestry of various Indian origin fraternities and their respective descendants. Over a period of time, descendants of the fish fraternity adopted the ram and the horse symbols. Interestingly, the horse fraternity was known as Osho fraternity, and as they spread over many regions, the continent acquired the name Asia. As the Osho fraternity of two territories joined during their reverse migration, they were known as Oshinis or Oshidoi, two horses. Two horses forming a twin brother team is common in the iconography of many regions of Eurasia, including India. Finally, it is possible that during the matriarchal period, the fraternity adopted the feminine species as their ethnic identity, like the cow. As they adopted the patriarchal culture, they adopted the bull as their ethnic symbol. Both the cow and the bull are considered as sacred animals in India. Bull is also the Vahan of Shiva. It took me many years of analysis and collection of photographs from not only all over the Indian subcontinent but also foreign territories like Egypt to understand and arrange the sequence of the process. It took me some time to understand the complexity of fusion fraternities. I had to scratch my head for years to understand the phases of matriarchal and patriarchal period and the subsequent alteration of the animal symbols. I feel that understanding the hierarchy of the animal symbols would help arrange the migration path of various early human fraternities all over the world. A complex Vahan of goddess Ganga provided clues regarding the fraternities which migrated along the river during the matriarchal period. Image of Lamassu suggested that in the Assyrian Empire, the king was dependent on the bull and the avian fraternities. Similarly, a complex culture in Sri Lanka suggested that Osur fraternity emerged from the Naga and the turtle fraternity, and they worshipped Shiva and Saraswati. It is interesting to note that surnames like Nag, Bagh, Hathi, Singho and Pakhi are still common in Bengal. Similarly, we find fraternities like Mech and Koch in North Bengal. In all probability, Mech originated from Mach, meaning fish in Bengali, and they belong to the fish fraternity. Similarly, Koch possibly originated from the Bengali word Kochchop, meaning turtle. There are territories in Assam and Bengal like Kachar, Koch Bihar, Koch Hajo, Kustia suggesting their settlements. It is most likely that these early human fraternities named their settlements after the animal symbols which represented their ethnic fraternities. As these fraternities migrated from the Bengal coast, their migration path can be arranged. The migration path of the Bagh fraternity can be traced from Bagdogra in North Bengal, ascending along the Bagmati river and reaching the Baglum Kali temple in Nepal, and finally Baghdad in Mesopotamia across Mount Kailash. A number of localities are named after Bagh in Afghanistan like Baglan, Bagram and so on. Baghdad is located on river Tigris, which also means Bagh in Bengali. Is it just a coincidence? Interestingly, it is only in Bengali that tiger is known as Bagh. Similarly, it is possible to trace the migration path of the fish fraternity. Fish is the Vahan of Ganga, suggesting the onward migration of the fish fraternity from Ganga Ridhi along river Ganga from Bengal coast. We have Mechi Nodi and Mechi Kali in Nepal. We find territories like Mesopotamia, Masa of Turkey, Macedonia and finally Mycenaean civilization of ancient Greece. Koch or turtle fraternity migration path can be established from Bengal and Assam along river Jamuna of Bangladesh to reach Kailash. Incidentally, turtle is the Vahan of Jamuna, suggesting its migration along the river. As one descends along Indus from Kailash, one reaches Kutch of Gujarat and Kutchi district of Balochistan. Following the Persian Gulf, one reaches the territory of Kassites in Mesopotamia, and finally the Koch fraternity emerges as Kusites in the Horn of Africa. It is possible that the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus Mountains were so named as they were Koch fraternity settlements. Hathi is one of the most successful Indian origin fraternities which spread all over the world. They named their settlements Hathi and Hattusa in Turkey. Their king was Hattusili and their kingdom was known as Hittite Empire. Their settlements along the Mediterranean coast was named Gojo, now famous as the Gaza Strip, and their settlement in Lower Egypt was named Giza, also from Gojo. As the Gojo fraternity was matriarchal in nature, their settlement in Afghanistan was known as Gajani. Mokor, or the elephant-headed fish, is the Bahon of Ganga, suggesting migration of this fusion fraternity along river Ganga. The Makran coast derived its name from the Mokor fraternity settlement, who takes care of the Mogor or crocodile. In the Horn of Africa, they were known as Makuria language speakers, and their kingdom was known as Makuria Kingdom. Interestingly, Nubians of Egypt keep crocodile as a pet and draw crocodile in front of their house. Proto-Bengali and Pali languages spread to the Mediterranean coast, Egypt and Greece. Their settlement was known as Palistan, now Palestine. On the other hand, Proto-Bengali and the spoken Sanskrit language spread to Anatolia and Europe. The same Indian origin fraternity settlements were known by different names in these two territories. The elephant fraternity settlement was known as Hathi in Turkey and as Gojo and Giza in the Mediterranean coast and Egypt. Similarly, fish settlements were known as Mesopotamia, Masa, Motso, Macedonia and Mycenaean civilization in Europe, and they were known as Min fraternity in Egypt, who established the Minoan civilization. The Indian origin fraternities named their settlements after Bengali animal names like Naga, Hathi, Masa, Bagh, Koch and so on. While following their reverse migration back to India, their settlements were named after Sanskrit animal names like Hostinapur, Ohikhetro, Urmanchal, Matsumahajanapada and so on. This establishes a very old association between the Bengali and Sanskrit languages. Bengali possibly remained popular for several thousand years in these regions. Thus, when new fraternities like Shingho and Osho formed there after several thousand years, they had Bengali names. Osho means horse both in Bengali and Sanskrit. Shingho is a purely Bengali word for lion. I am told it is known as Simha in Sanskrit. Several ethnic fraternities adopted various animal symbols, and as they migrated from the Bengal coast, they spread Bengali language to those distant lands. What was so special about the Bengal coast where all these ethnic fraternities developed? Is it possible that newer AMH fraternities like R1 Alpha and R1 Bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome originated in this region? Unless we are able to establish the unique nature of the Bengal-Myanmar coast to justify the origin of newer genetic identities, the discussion regarding the migration of various ethnic fraternities from the Bengal coast becomes baseless, and also the spread of Bengali language. Interestingly, R1 alpha haplogroup in Y chromosome genetic identity is found in the entire Indo-European language-speaking territory, extending from Bengal in the eastern India to western Europe. Thus, this entire territory is clearly linguistically and genetically continuous. Europe also has high percentage of R1 Bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome genetic identity. This genetic identity is found in various other regions of Asia, including India and Mesopotamia, and also in the Afro-Asian speaking Central Africa. Interestingly, an isolated pocket of this genetic identity is found on the Bengal coast, which has not received the required attention so far. These isolated pockets need to be included while charting the early migration path of the fraternity. In fact, these isolated pockets could be their oldest settlements. Presently, it is believed that R1 alpha and R1 Bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome both originated in Eastern Europe near the European steppe and Anatolia region. However, many scholars consider that the origin of R1 alpha in South Asia cannot be ruled out. In fact, Underhill, who conducted a widespread genetic analysis of the Indo-European speaking territory, marked Gujarat as having the oldest R1 alpha and several Himalayan pockets with the highest concentration of R1 alpha. This itself clashes with the European steppe as the site of origin of R1 alpha hypothesis. A number of Aboriginal tribes live in the Andaman archipelago. However, there is very little discussion about who were these people, where, when and how did they reach there. The only possible explanation is that they walked into Andaman archipelago from the Bengal-Myanmar coast when a land bridge formed. During the glacial maximum, the sea level subsides by about 400 feet or 130 meters, and the Bengal coastline recedes, connecting Andamans with the mainland. During glacial period, for several thousand years, a huge coastal landmass surfaces between the Bengal and Myanmar coast, which is referred to as the Bengal Glacial Coastal Shelf in this book. At this time, the population of two distinct genetic territories, the Bengal coast and the Southeast Asian, intermix, and this genetic union produces newer genetic identities like R1 alpha and R1 bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome. As the seawater gradually rises during the interglacial period, this coastal landmass submerges, displacing the settled population. They settled on the Bengal coast and adopted various animal symbols as their ethnic identity. To begin with, they were bare-bodied and were known as Nanga, who adopted the Naga or the serpent as their ethnic symbol. It is possible that their mother goddess was Kali, who is also depicted bare-bodied. These early fraternities eventually migrated following the Trans-Himalayan migration routes pivoting Mount Kailash. The Indus Valley civilization emerged on this route. They continued their journey and established the Egyptian and Greek civilization. It is extremely crucial to establish the site of origin of R1 alpha and R1 bravo haplogroups in Y chromosome on the Bengal coast 10,000 years ago, because that will provide us the direction of the early and anatomical modern human migration and spread of Bengali language and culture from Bengal coast. About 10,000 years ago, R1 bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome migrated to Africa, establishing the Egyptian civilization and spreading Proto-Bengali and Pali language in the Mediterranean region. Similarly, about 5,800 years ago, R1 alpha haplogroup in Y chromosome migrated to Eastern Europe along with the spoken Sanskrit language. It is likely that a matriarchal culture evolved on the Bengal coast at a very early date. During this period, goddesses became more popular. Kali is known as Adi Shakti or primordial energy. Probably she is one of the earliest concepts of religion and deity. She is depicted bare-bodied, suggesting her very early origin. Kali is most popular in Bengal, and a common saying in the rest of the country is Kali Kalkatte Wali. Kolkata derived its name from Kali. Kali worshipping fraternities are collectively known as Shakta fraternity, who are worshippers of Shakti or Kali. There are 51 Adi Shakti Peeths or ancient Kali temples spread across the Indian subcontinent. 11 Shakti Peeths are located in West Bengal and 5 in Bangladesh. The large number of Shakti Peeths in Bengal suggest their popularity in the region. Interestingly, when their locations are connected, they possibly provide the direction of the early migration paths. Once I actually followed the Shakti Peeths to trace the journey of Kali along the Himalayan rivers towards Mount Kailash. I traced the Shakti Peeths from Mithila to Kathmandu and Muktinath in Nepal. There are a number of Shakti Peeths in the Kangra Valley in Himachal and a few in Punjab and Gujarat providing the migration path. One Shakti Peeth is located on the Makran coast known as Hinglaj, where Kali crosses the border of the Indian subcontinent. It is extremely interesting that Lieutenant Wilford, a British officer, wrote an article in the Asiatic Researches in 1794 where he established that the Nile River was known as the Kali River, and this is mentioned in the Padma Puran and Skanda Puran. Thus it appears that the early migrating fraternities continued their journey beyond Kailash and the Makran coast and established their mother goddess in their distant settlements. In all probability, Kali manifested as Black Madonna in Europe. Why should a fair complexion fraternity worship a dark deity unless she was their deity since a very early period? It is possible that from Kailash, the Kali worshipping fraternities traveled to Europe via Turkey. A majority of the rivers of the Indian subcontinent have feminine names like Ganga, Jamuna and Saraswati. It is likely that early matriarchal fraternities who migrated along these rivers named these rivers after their ethnic deity. Each of these river goddesses has a bahun suggesting the migration of specific fraternities along them. River Ganga has fish and makor as her bahun, Jamuna has turtle and Saraswati has avian goose as her bahun. In all probability, these were matriarchal fraternities in the early stage. Goddesses like Kali, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Monasa and many others are extremely popular in Bengal. It is likely that these goddesses emerged during a matriarchal period when women were considered as a depository of knowledge, wealth and power. As the matriarchal community spread to distant destinations, we find emergence of goddesses like Nat, Hathor and Isis in Egypt. They were the early deities who ruled the Egyptian civilization for a period before gods emerged in their pantheon. Similarly, in Greece, Athena was very popular at the early stage of the establishment of European civilization. Athens, the ancient city of Greece, derived its name from Athena, like Kolkata deriving its name from Kali. It is also possible that Troy and Tyre derived its name from Tara. It is extremely unlikely that these goddesses emerged during a patriarchal period. The matriarchal communities were probably known by different names like Kumari, Konna, Nari, Jubati and so on. They are now known as Newari and their territory Kumayun. In distant lands, they were known as Cimmerians, Nurustani, Ghazni and by other such names. In Africa, their settlements were known as Cameroon from Kumari, Kenya from Konna and Djibouti from Jubati. There is Konna in Turkey too. As I stood in front of Pompey's pillar in Alexandria in Egypt, I realized the association of Bengal with Alexandria. The Sphinx of Alexandria guarding Pompey's pillar complex appeared to me very similar to Durga, who is inseparably associated with the lion. In fact, the origin of the name Sphinx remains a mystery till today. Lieutenant Wilford mentioned in his article that it probably originated from the word Singhik, meaning lion-like or associated with lion. This appears to be quite an acceptable explanation. I was overjoyed to read that the Sphinx was associated with the word Shingho. As we have mentioned before, Shingho is a typical Bengali word meaning lion. I wonder if this word is used in any other language for lion. I was equally thrilled when I went to the Philae temple in Aswan in Egypt. I found typical brachycephalic faces and slanting eyes of Isis created on the temple pillars, remarkably similar to the faces of the deities of Bengal. On top of almost every pillar, lotus images have been sculpted, when lotus is not a natural flower of Egypt. It appeared that thousands of years ago, Indian artists had created images of their own goddesses Sri, who manifested as Isis in Egypt. However, Isis is shown with a yellow complexion, very similar to Lakshmi or Sri of Bengal, associated with the owl as her bahun and lotus as her throne. As such, in Egyptian art, we find an abundance of owl and goose images. At the entrance of the Edfu temple, a large image of a falcon is bound to attract the attention of Indians. This mythical eagle is the associate of Horus in Egypt. Our Hori or Vishnu also has a strikingly similar mythical eagle, popularly known as Gadura, as his bahun. I wonder if Hori has manifested as Horus in Egypt. This is similar to Osur manifesting as Osiris and Sri as Isis. Interestingly, like our Osur, Osiris is also green complexion, a rather unusual color of the skin. The relative position of Nut and Jeb, two early deities of the Egyptian pantheon, appeared to have a similarity with the composite image of Kali and Shiva in Bengal. Here, the deity Nut is placed over her consort Zeb, who lies on the ground like Shiva in Bengal. The names Zeb and Shid are phonetically quite similar. Moreover, Nut is studded with stars, and one of the manifestations of Kali is Tara, meaning stars. Kali is associated with the crematorium in India and Nut with the burial sites in Egypt. Interestingly, Nut and Jev have 2 sons and 2 daughters very similar to Shiva and Durga of Bengal. I thought that I could identify a number of Vedic deities in the Egyptian pantheon. The image of the crocodile-faced god Sobek and his family in front of the Komombo temple in Egypt fitted perfectly with the Vedic deity Varun, who has the crocodile as his Vahan. Amun-Re, the fire god of Egypt, is associated with Ram, while the Vahan of Vedic deity Ogni is Ram. Similarly, Ra, or the sun god of Egypt, appears to have derived his name from Ravi, meaning Surya, one of the main Vedic deities of India. It appears that the Egyptian deity Shu derived his name from the hissing sound the wind makes, suggesting that he is the manifestation of Vayu of the Vedas. Nut also could be a manifestation of the Vedic goddess Ratri, who also has stars as her ornaments. Another interesting subject is the global color code, which also remains almost undiscussed. The deities are often drawn in specific colors, and in traditional painting this does not change. This is observed not only in the Indian pantheon but also in Egyptian art. It is likely that each color represents a global territory with which the deity is associated. It appears that the Indian territory is represented by blue and yellow colors, while Egyptian territory by red, Persian by green, and European by white color. I wonder how a major event like the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities remained completely unnoticed and therefore undiscussed in academic forums. The concept of Invariant migration is often discussed, though it was considered as a primary migration from Europe to India and never as a reverse migration. On the other hand, any concept of reverse migration from Egypt is not known. At least, I have never heard any serious discussion about the subject. In the second half of my book, I have discussed the evidences of reverse migration of Indian origin fraternities from Egypt by different routes and in different periods. It is apparent that the land route reverse migration took place along the Uttarapath and the Indus Valley civilization. In fact, the mature period of the Indus Valley civilization, that is from 2600 to 1900 BC, perfectly coincides with the peak period of the land route reverse migration from Egypt. As such, Indus Valley civilization was located on the land route from India to Egypt. We find the emergence of the reverse migration animal symbols like the lion, horse, boar and peacock along the Uttarapath. They are found all over the subcontinent, especially in the Indian Himalayas, Nepal, Bhutan, Tibetan Plateau, Bengal and Northeast India. These regions were connected with Egypt and Europe through the Uttarapath. A number of evidences identify the onward and reverse migration routes. I have seen 2 owners of a shop in Pokhara, Nepal. One was short with brachycephalic features, which is possibly a typical feature of indigenous Indians. In this case, the face is roundish with breadth more than 80% of the vertical height of the face, while the other was not only tall but had oligocephalic face with width of the face less than 75% of the height. This is a typical feature of some parts of Europe. I have also seen Kali in Kamalasagar temple of Tripura draped in white shadi, suggesting her reverse migration nature. A dramatic change occurred in the reverse migration route when a direct sea route was established between the Red Sea and the west coast of India around 1500 BC. The new land route was possibly referred to as Dakshinapath, which joined Uttarapath near Mount Kailash. The Sodosho Mahajanapadas emerged along these 2 highways, which were exclusively recorded in the Jain and Buddhist texts written in Pali. This suggested that these were the settlements of the Pali speakers. Their absence in Sanskrit records exposes a rivalry between the Pali and Sanskrit speakers. In all probability, reverse migration fraternities from Europe were Sanskrit speakers, and the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt were Pali and Prakrita speakers. At this juncture, as the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt came by ship directly to the west coast of India, nobody traveled along the old land route via the Indus Valley civilization, resulting in its silent collapse. As such, we could not find any cause for the collapse of Indus Valley civilization. As 16 Mahajanapadas emerged in northern India, it gave an impression that Indus Valley civilization population had shifted to the Gangetic plains. It appears that the reverse migration fraternities were primarily interested in reaching the matriarchal territory of Bengal. However, in the meantime, Ponchogaudo or ancient Bengal had closed their boundaries as a majority of the reverse migration fraternities had adopted the patriarchal culture. Thus, 4 Mahajanapadas emerged just outside the boundary of Bengal and none in the east and south of it. The 4 Mahajanapadas which emerged adjacent to Bengal were Vriji, Molla, Magadh and Ongo. This close nature of the Ganga Ridhi or Ponchogauda region is another least discussed subject. In all probability, the Greek ambassador Megasthenes had described the refined administrative system of this little known and restricted territory, which did not match with the available description of the rest of India. Over a period, the sea route from Red Sea got extended to the Bay of Bengal as the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt were keen to reach the matriarchal territories of Ganga Ridhi. The Prakrita-speaking fraternities returned back to Bengal at this stage. The Egyptian deities Hathor and Isis, created on the front facade of the Cairo Museum, were associated with lotuses, much like Lakshmi and Saraswati of the Indian Pantheon. These images have striking similarities with the Sri or Lakshmi images of Chandraketugor. Similarly, several terracotta artifacts of Chandraketugor have a pair of wings, a characteristic feature of Isis, the Egyptian manifestation of Sri. As the Bengali-speaking reverse migration fraternity settled in Bangladesh, their Bengali dialect were different. This establishes the process of reverse migration and also that Bengali was nurtured around the Red Sea region for a long time. Bengalis can easily understand the Odia and Assamese languages. Ptolemy's map drawn at the beginning of the Christian era clearly shows 5 openings of the river Ganga. This map surprisingly does not show any other landmark of India but the location of Ganga Ridhi. In fact, we find a detailed description of the military power of the king of Ganga Ridhi in the notes of Greek and Roman scholars. Sagar Island is considered as the principal opening of Ganga into the Bay of Bengal, and thus 5 tributaries of Ganga were possibly located around this region. It is possible that because the Egyptian people had spread from Bengal coast, they had a compulsion to return to Ganga Ridhi and Kirat Desh, marked as Kiradesh in the map. I have been exploring Northeast India since 1975. As I conceived the idea of the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities from distant lands, Manipur specially attracted my attention. Manipuris have features similar to Bengalis and Marathas. Vishnupriya Manipuri languages similarity with Magadhi Prakrito, Marathi Prakrito and Shaurashini Prakrito. They have adopted Gaudiya Chaitanya Vaishnavism. Professor Suniti Kumar Chatterjee has mentioned that they adopted Vaishnavism as early as 8th century AD. Their dynastic period started since 33 AD as per their chronicle Koitharol Kumbaba, though the initial part of it is based on oral record. I was surprised to see several features of Bengal villages in Manipur, including Tulusi Moncho and household looms. I felt an ardent need to align their distant connectivity. Many of the Northeast Indian regions still have a matriarchal descent culture very similar to West Bengal. As I extensively explored the 7 states of Northeast India, I realized that the reverse migration fraternities had settled in the region since a very early period. During the land route migration period, they had come through Uttarapath along river Brahmaputra. Many of them had settled in the higher reaches of the Himalayas like Monpas of Tawang, while some others descended to the Brahmaputra valley constructing Eta Fort, Vishmaknagar and Rukmininagar forts and so on. The reverse migration fraternities from the Red Sea arrived later and settle in the region using two different routes. One fraternity from the Bay of Bengal ascended along the rivers of Bangladesh to settle in Assam and Tripura. Thus we find ancient Greek art popularly known as Hellenistic art in the 6th century Dohoparbatiya temple of Tejpur. In Koilashahar, Tripura, we find unusual huge rock-cut images of Shiva in the Unakoti complex. Indian origin people had extraordinary skill in rock cutting and handling huge stone blocks. It is possible that they created obelisks in Egypt and Stonehenge in Europe 3 to 5,000 years ago. Following the reverse migration, they continued to create such unfathomable stone blocks in the Indian subcontinent as the skill was indigenous. They created the Nartian monoliths of Meghalaya till as late as 1883. They are 8 meters tall and quite comparable in dimension to that of the Stonehenge of England. In fact, the horizontal round plates about 1 foot thick are more difficult to cut, but they are not known to the world. The reverse migration fraternities from Red Sea region entered the Northeast Indian states from the east also as they ascended along river Irrawaddy and Chinwin. The Ahoms reached along this route in the 13th century. The ancestral memorials of Ahon in Charaidao are known as Maidems, which are miniature replica of the pyramids of Egypt. In fact, the oldest Egyptian pyramids were also known as Maidems. The Hebrew name of Egypt is Mirzaim. Mizos had been given visa by Israel as they were considered to be one of the lost tribes of Israel. One of the oldest Egyptian document, Periplus of the Eritrean Sea, compiled at the beginning of the Christian era, mentions about the connectivity of Red Sea and this region. There is a need to arrange the pre-recorded period of India based on ground evidences. I intend to start a discussion on the following issues. India is a unique territory and is the only region other than Africa where AMH lived continuously for 65,000 years. They spread to the rest of Eurasia only during every interglacial period. The present population of Europe reached there from India 10,000 years ago during the last interglacial period. Newer AMHs like R1 Alpha and R1 Bravo formed on the Bengal coast during the last glacial period. They adopted various animal symbols and spread to distant territories like the Mediterranean coast, Egypt and Europe. A matriarchal community with their deities and Bengali language spread from the Bengal coast to these regions. At a later date, a reverse migration took place, initially by the land route and later by the sea route. This is what has been compiled in this book with evidences. This is the first volume of a series of books which establishes that the Indian origin fraternities established the Egyptian civilization. Subsequent volumes would deal with the evidences of connectivity of the Indian civilization with the European civilization.
There is one more subject we need to talk about. So far we have discussed regarding the pre-recorded period. Now let us see what is there in the recorded form. As we have discussed, that it appears that people from Bengal coast with their language and culture reached Egypt and Greece pretty early and possibly established those civilizations. Did the Greeks and Egyptians keep in touch with their ancestral place, Bengal? Do we have any authentic record at that end, especially about Bengal? Like we see the Bengalis when they are settled nowadays in UK and USA, they keep special interest. I mean, they keep in touch with Bengal. So did anything of those records are available at that end? And if it is available, then why we are not discussing that in our history? It is high time that we initiated a discussion on Ganga Riddhi. Many of the scholars have mentioned that Chandraketugad, the archaeological site located 35 kilometers away from Kolkata, was the capital of the ancient kingdom Ganga Riddhi. In fact, I have heard that West Bengal is searching for a new name. Ganga Riddhi, as per me, it would be the most appropriate name. Once we adopt this name, there will be a lot of discussion about Ganga Riddhi at the national and international level. Even the Bengalis would come to know about their glorious past. just a minute. Let me show you why I am making a statement like this, and then you come up with your questions. Now I will show you a short video in relation to that what is there in recorded form in the Egyptian, Greek, and Roman records. Video.
In my view, onward migration of early human fraternities following the last glacial period started from the Bengal coast. They settled in Egypt, Greece, and the rest of Europe. In the second half of the book, I am discussing about the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities back to India. It appears that the popular term Indo-Aryan invasion refers to the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities from Europe. I had to discuss a number of new subjects without which the pre-recorded period of India could not be arranged in a scientific manner. One of these is the formation of a glacial coastal shelf on the Bengal-Myanmar Bay during the last glacial period. This resulted in the origin of the newer AMH genetic identities like R1 alpha and R1 bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome on the Bengal coast. Thus, Bengal played a crucial role in the spread of the Indian origin fraternities to faraway lands like Egypt, Mediterranean coast, and Greece. Let us see how much of the Bengal region is recorded in the Western historical texts and how much of it we understand. I would prefer to start the video with a number of issues which are most authentically recorded in the Western world but are seldom discussed in the history of India or that of Bengal. I am not a historian and thus I am not going into the details of the authentically recorded history of Bengal. But what intrigued me is that several issues about Bengal recorded in Western world are often not given due recognition. In this respect, I would like to share a few of my observations. First, as we Google search for Gangaridai, we find an elaborate description of the region recorded in Greek and Latin records. This article elaborates that several famous Greek and Roman scholars had extensive knowledge about Gangaridai and they kept historical notes about the region. In fact, it even says that the military power of Gangaridai was so much that Alexander went back with his force after hearing about the military strength of the region. Diodorus Siculus, in his 1st century BC Bibliotheca Historica, mentions that the Gangaridai king had 20,000 cavalry, 200,000 infantry, 2,000 chariots and 4,000 elephants equipped for war. Second, Greek ambassador Megasthenes, in his Indica, meticulously described Gangaridi region, which was totally different from the description of rest of India available in our ancient Sanskrit and Pali texts. Once again, we prefer to avoid discussing about the contents of Indica, an authentic Greek record. This document definitely formed a major component of the description of the Gangaridi available in the Google today. Megasthenes described following 7 castes, or more appropriately 7 divisions in the social structure of Gangaridi: philosophers, husbandmen, shepherds, artisans, military, overseers, and councillors and assessors. These councillors and assessors were the most respected fraternity. Kings, treasurers, generals, chief magistrates, arbiters who settle disputes, etc. belong to this fraternity. This classification of a territory of ancient India does not match with the 4 caste social structure comprising of Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra that is recorded in the Sanskrit texts of India. Is it possible that Megasthenes described Gangaridi about which no description is available in Indian texts, whereas the region was well recorded in the Western records? Those of you who are not comfortable with Wikipedia and believe in more authentic records are requested to go through a fabulous document, The Classical Accounts of India by R.C. Majumdar. Third, let us see where exactly Gangaridai was located. We have a very clear and authentic document in this regard, the Ptolemy's map. Drawn at the beginning of Christian era, it elaborately describes 5 divisions of river Ganga near its delta. It even mentions 5 different Greek names for each division, suggesting that they not only knew about 5 divisions of Ganga delta, but were interested to locate the territory more specifically around each division. Pliny named 5 mouths of Gangas as Complexion, Mega, Cambericon, Pseudostomon and Antipole. Interestingly, this map does not mark any other territory along the west and east coast of India. This map clearly establishes the exact location of Ganga Ridhi in the heart of present-day West Bengal. Apart from Ganga Ridhi, it marks Kiradesh on the east of the delta, suggesting their interest in this region too. The knowledge and interest of Egyptian and Greek sailors, specifically about Ganga Ridhi and Kiradesh, is evident from these records. Fourth, there is another authentic and useful Egyptian document, Periplus of the Eritrean Sea. This is considered to be a compilation by a Greek sailor based in Alexandria, Egypt, once again at the beginning of the Christian era. It provides a description of trade items and names of various ports where the Egyptian sailors ventured during that period in the east coast of Africa as well as on the west and east coast of India. It describes a territory even farther east of Ganga Ridhi on the Bay of Bengal. Interestingly, in section 65 it mentions a specific location on the north of the edge of Bay of Bengal. This destination was probably located on the border of Assam and China, from where they collected a product called Malabatram. It could possibly be reached only by sailing upstream Irrawaddy and Chindwin from the Bay of Bengal. I am sure historians are not considering this complex connectivity of the Red Sea sailors to this odd corner of northeast India. However, I prefer to mention about this as it has a bearing on my subject. Evidently, all the above documents are most authentic historical records. However, we find these authentically recorded texts in the Western world about ancient India seldom discussed in the history of India and that of Bengal. In fact, earliest recorded period of Indian history should have started based on these authentic records. They are mysteriously missing from our history, possibly because we are unable to understand the ancient connectivity of Bengal with Egypt, Greece and Mediterranean coast. Thus, we are unable to appreciate their extraordinary interest in Ganga Ridhi of Bengal and Kirat Desha, both of which are located farthest from the Mediterranean region. A mysterious lacuna remains in the ancient history of India related to the Ganga Ridhi region as well. A coastal territory east of Magadh remained outside the boundary of Mauryan Empire during the rule of Chandragupta Maurya and his son Bindusara. His grandson Ashoka, however, fought the famous War of Kalinga in the region, but surprisingly we do not know the name of the king against whom Ashoka fought this destructive war. Though the king of Ganga Ridhi was the only possible and suitable opponent in the region, if we consider the Greek records, but Ganga Ridhi as a militarily powerful kingdom or the king of Ganga Ridhi as the opponent of Ashoka is not mentioned anywhere in the ancient history of India. Are we blindly following the account of Indian history that was given by our foreign rulers? Are we missing the most important period and territory of our glorious past and are still not able to showcase it to the entire world even after 70 years of independence? Once we discuss the probable events of the pre-recorded period in relation to Bengal coast, we may find the missing link. Once we consider the onward migration of the Indian origin fraternities from the Bengal coast to these faraway places, we would be able to appreciate the ethnic connectivity and the spread of Bengali language and their culture to these distant lands. Finally, once we consider the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities at a later date from Egypt, Greece and Mediterranean coast, we find emergence of various settlements all over India, including many around the Bengal region. Those who came by the land route settled along the Uttarapath in Nepal, Tibet, Bhutan, North Bengal and Northeast India, while those who returned by sea route from the Red Sea region settled in Odisha, East Bengal, Assam and Tripura, whose language and culture is quite comparable to West Bengal. Many regions of Northeast India appear to have a matriarchal descent culture similar to Bengal. These are the features we see on ground but their origin are rarely explained in our history and thus little understood. Till we manage to arrange the pre-recorded past of India in a sensible manner, we would not be comfortable quoting from the Greek, Egyptian and Roman records regarding our country. Under such a situation, it is worth making an effort to arrange the pre-recorded past of India, without which the history of India and that of the world would remain inaccurate. We have to arrange the sequence of events on the basis of genetic, archaeological, anthropological, linguistic and cultural evidences. Let us make an effort to appreciate this new approach towards understanding the pre-recorded past of India.
Hello. 17 actually during till the beginning of 19th century ব্রিটিশরা কেন ইউরোপিয়ানরা একটা অন্য ভাবে দেখতো ইন্ডিয়াকে হট করে একটা পিরিয়ডে যখন ওরা অ্যাকচুয়ালি ক্যাপচার করে ফেললো তখন দেখলো সেই রকম ভাবে দেখলে হয়তো ওরা আমাদের উপরে ঠিকমতো রুল করতে পারবে না সাডেনলি এট দ্য বিগিনিং অফ 19th সেঞ্চুরি ওদের মেন্টালিটিতে একটা মানে ওদের অ্যাপ্রোচটা চেঞ্জ হয়ে গেল যেটার একটা এফেক্ট আমরা ম্যাকলের এটাতে পাই 1835-এ যখন এলেন একদম পুরো উল্টে দিয়ে চলে গেলেন যে না এখানকার সিভিলাইজেশন বা এখানকার লিটারেচার বা এখানকার ইয়ের কোনো ভ্যালু নেই তোমাদের সব কিছু ব্রিটিশ জিনিসটা পড়তে হবে খুব সুন্দর করে উনি গুছিয়ে ব্রিটিশ অ্যাপ্রোচ টু ইন্ডিয়ান এডুকেশনটা কমপ্লিটলি নষ্ট করে দিয়ে ওনাদেরটা এস্টাবলিশ করলেন ঠিক তার আগে 1794-এ একটা 183 পাতার আর্টিকেল বেরিয়েছিল এশিয়াটিক রিসার্চেস থেকে ওকে actually suddenly at the beginning of the 19th century there was a change in the attitude of the British that before that many of the British scholars prior to that had a completely different idea about the Indian civilization. They respected the Indian civilization. So 1794 there is an article published by Lieutenant Wilford in the Asiatic Researches where he clearly just imagine this article was 183 pages almost taking more than half the journal if not more. There they established that the Nile River was known as Kali River. I'm not claiming it was established by a British and it was seconded by Sir William Jones who was the founder president of the Asiatic Society of India. And in fact to substantiate that he came up with further information from Skanda Puran and Padma Puran yes what Wilford has written I not only second I add further information to that. Now that was the approach to the British. So at that time if we actually see the documents available till 1818 or 1805 their approach was quite different. So we have to go back to that if we really want that what British thought about India at that time or what Europeans thought of India about that time. Forget about what what they did after they realized in that way they probably will not be able to successfully rule the areas which were much more civilized much more enlightened than them at that stage or during the ancient time. So as Madam mentioned that this is very important that the Nile River was actually known as Kali River and it was established by the British or the Europeans. Yes. A minute. Just what is this?
Coming back to the subject, in fact, you have taken a lot of parameters like your animal symbols. Rather, I shall stamp them as markers. You have used many markers, animal symbols, matriarchal culture, all these things, as well as genetics. As far as this was, in fact, it was a bit difficult for most of the people to go through, even me also, as far as genetic. That is the most accurate and scientific evidence of presence of similar human being or whatever the animal of same origin. Okay, So in that case, I shall request you to elaborate this part, not only in Y chromosome haplotype alpha, say R1 alpha and R1 beta. These are not only the only parameters. It's a vast subject. So I shall request you, rather, I shall request the authority and Secretary Maharaj to arrange another lecture on the genetic similarities. Number one. Number two, did you analyze any bone remnant of any Egyptian, say, body and any bone remnant of Bengali up here? Did you do any spectroscopic analysis?
Thank you very much. Your first question is very, very important, because as you can see, our approach is the way we have approached that newer genetic identities actually originated on the Bengal coast, and the migration started from Bengal. For that, genetics is definitely the most scientific subject which can confirm what we are saying, or this hypothesis is tenable or not. So definitely we need to, here I thought we are introducing too many new subjects in this lecture. That the migration started from Bengal, that Bengal glacial coastal shelf, animal symbol, trans-Himalayan migration, reverse migration by land route. So what I did is I covered genetics, but in a very concise manner. Maybe that has caused a little difficulty for you to understand how come these newer genetic data are in our favor, what we are saying. Actually, it needs a much more elaborate presentation only on genetics. It is possible. You don't have to be a geneticist to know what I am saying. What I will discuss is that the present view is actually established or claimed by the Western scholars, which is in favor of them. But over a period of time, they have published other genetic study reports which are available to us. Now, in those reports, there are things which has come up, especially about India, and especially in the last 1 or 2 decades, or 10 to 15 years, which they are not explaining. You know, they have declared that they have found that Indian population is divided into northern territory has a different population, genetic identity, and southern. Okay, fine, that is your observation, that is your inference in a study, but what is the explanation of that? That is not yet come to that extent that it clearly explains why is that. Whereas when we explain that probably that this division is because India is the only country out of Africa where the anatomical modern human survived during both pre-recorded pre-glacial period and post-glacial period, and the pre-glacial period genetic identity is different, and the majority of them, these dark complexion tribes, they live south of Vindhya Parbat. So that is why you are getting two different genetic identities. I don't know, I have to discuss with the geneticists how do they explain. On top of that, there is another very interesting genetic findings that in some of the genetic studies which have been published very recently, they have declared that the essential genetic identity of higher caste people and lower caste people are same. Now, if we take that Indo-Aryan migration, whether it is primary or secondary reverse migration, basically those who came as Aryans, they were the higher caste people. And how come the genetic identity and higher caste people generally remain quite isolated? They never genetically interacted with the lower caste people. In fact, they made them lower, achut or something like that. They never interacted with them socially and marital relationship-wise. So, how come the genetic identity of higher caste and lower caste can be seen? These are the things which we have to discuss when we discuss genetics much more elaborately. But I thought in the first lecture, you must have the basic idea that we are discussing about a reverse migration. We are discussing that the early civilized people went from Bengal coast. Then in the second lecture, if the authorities permit me, we can discuss exactly how the latest genetic data are in our favor.
Doctor,
how are you?
You mentioned that it's the Indians who established the Egyptian civilization and the Greek and the Mesopotamian. Now, in Egypt, you find the pyramids. Mm-hmm. So, which means, do you say that Indians are the ones who built the pyramids?
Yes.
Now, if that is the case, why are there no pyramids in India?
See, I don't know. It is not that I don't know why there are no pyramids. There are similar structures, but we are unable to identify them and equate them. This is the pyramid. You know, there is a structure called Sigiriya in Sri Lanka. It's a huge structure. It appears to be man-made. Now, just because the shape of that structure is not like pyramid does not necessarily mean it has got nothing to do with pyramid. This indicates that those people were capable of handling huge stone blocks and they could arrange them. And in fact, if you go to Hampi, I don't know, I have to take the geologist with me to explain to them, don't you think that this structure is man-made? Yes, what they did is they blended it so nicely that now it looks almost like a natural structure. But they are possibly man-made structures and they are equivalent to pyramid, though they don't have that regular shape. In fact, this is much more difficult to give the natural form to an artificial structure. You know that it looks like you can't make out that it is actually a man-made structure. So that's I personally feel, if you ask me, but that will unnecessarily create controversy at this stage. So this is a concept. It is not that if you see what is a pyramid? A pyramid is arrangement of a regular blocks of stone cut blocks. It indicates that they had the capability to cut the stone the way they wanted. And they had the mathematical calculation to arrange them in a manner that it gives a perfect shape. That is a mathematical marvel actually, that how so many stones blocks were arranged in this side, that side, and so that at the end it maintains a fabulous shape, a perfect shape. So this indicates that they had the stone cut capability to cut the stone, to handle or to transport that stone from one place to the other, and then they had immense mathematical capability. Now here when we go to, let us say, Sun Temple of Ellora, you cannot imagine how perfect they were in the calculation of how the sun rays will come and go and hit that structure from this angle and that angle, so that you can actually calculate up to minutes and in different season. You know, after winter solstice, I mean, how the angle of the sun changes, everything, the calculation is fantastic. And then if you discuss about the capability of stone cutting, if you go to Kailash Temple of Ellora, it is absolutely amazing. That at that time, we don't know when they constructed. It is certain that it's a very old structure, but we don't know, unfortunately, exactly when it was constructed. But it is a monolithic structure, and they had fabulous capability of stone cutting to create such a structure. So your primary things to create or construct pyramid, basically all you need is stone cutting capability and making and arrange them in a very mathematical manner. And here are the structures which they were constructing this very recently. Sun Temple was constructed in 13th century, only 800 years ago. So India is the place where this knowledge was inherent and it survived. What happened to Egypt and Greece? When the Indian people came back, they collapsed. If you withdraw everybody from Dubai, within 50 years, Dubai will become a skeleton. Because it is not maintained by the local people, it is maintained by other people. Other people are constructing, they don't know how to do it. The moment they withdraw, that will become a skeleton in no time. And that has happened to Egyptian civilization. What you see there is only temples. I repeat, what you see in Egypt is burial monuments and temples. That is the characteristic of Indians. Burial temples, ancestor memorials and temples. Primarily what you see, the structures in India are actually temples. There are no stadiums, there are no luxury items. In Egypt also you see only temples and burial monuments.
Sir,
I think he's trying to ask.
Sir, yeah, I just have only one point, sir. Sir, there is there is something called the Valari, which was used by the Tamil people, which is called the boomerang in Australia, in the Australian outback. Now, the Valari was used in wars with the British people by the Tamilians, where they threw the Valari and 8, 9, 10 heads were chopped off and the Valari came back. And then again they used. So by the time the British could reload their rifle and kill one person, 10 heads were chopped off. So the British were shocked. So they passed a law in 1801 where they said all the Valaris should be confiscated and destroyed. And they did that. And then, but then what about the people who have the skill and the expertise? Within no time, they again started making the Valari and using it. So these British took all these people on a ship, and in the middle of the ocean, they pushed them into the ocean and killed them. Mm-hmm. Now, recent archaeological excavations in the Australian outback have come up with tablets containing what? Containing Tamil writings. So what is the connection between the Indians and the Australian Aborigines? Are the Australian Aborigines themselves Indians? Or did the Indians go there and teach them the Valari, how to use the boomerang and other things?
With my limited knowledge, I'm trying to answer your ear. Firstly, okay.
Thank you very much.
I think just he was trying to answer questions.
Maharaj,
There are two
sorry.
more questions.
Sir, first of all, a very big applause for you for discussing this least discussed topic. But I have one question, two questions. First one is, sir, you said that the Mahajanapadas are not mentioned in the Sanskrit text, but many of the Mahajanapadas like Koshal, Ongo, Vanga, Magadha, all are mentioned in Ramayana and Mahabharata. Sri Ram himself comes from Koshal, and whereas Karna was the king of Anga. One thing, and why you missed Singhal? Because the ancient name of Sri Lanka, Singhala, in fact their flag also has the emblem of lion.
Yes.
So it is said that Vijay Singha,
okay,
he hails from Shingur, near today's Singapore.
Okay.
He went to Ceylon. And the last question, sir, that came from Maharaj's question, sir. He said the pyramids in Mayan pyramids, they also have a very similar structure, and they also are sun worshippers, Incas. And nowadays, in very recent past, Vishnu, we can see the Bengal pyramids in Vishnupur architecture.
Yes.
So will you please elaborate on this?
See, what I have given the presentation is only maybe 2% or 3% of the contents of the book. Now, we can't discuss everything. Like all these are part of reverse migration. As you mentioned, as we have mentioned, the Aboriginal tribes, they continued to reach Australia. That is a period 40,000 years ago. I think they had no very, very refined skill. So that was a different movement. At a later date, if you see the Ptolemy's map, it includes not only Bay of Bengal, not only east and west coast of India, but also Pacific. You know, eastern and western, northern and southern, from Ptolemy's map. So, 2000 years ago, there was a sea route connectivity, and that is how it reached Inca, they were constructed by the reverse migration people. You know, we could not discuss in detail that what all they brought during the reverse migration. I have only shown you that the Greek art has reached Tejpur. You know, the pyramid has reached here. Similarly, this is during the sea route connectivity. It reached North America and South America. So that is along the Trans-Pacific, and that is mentioned in the Ptolemy's map exactly where they were going. I think He's trying to close it. Okay.
Good evening, Doctor.
Yeah.
My question will be divided into two parts. The first thing is that the recent records show that the ancient Indian, South Indian gene is of the ancient Indian, and the ancient North Indian gene, it belongs to the ancient Indian as well as the northern steppe region, the Caucasus region. So basically, the influx and the outflux, the consequent influx and outflux and the diaspora of the migration which led to the previous things as you told. So did they mingle with each other on the transroads?
See, as we have discussed in short, that people from this place, their migration started, onward migration started from the Bengal coast. They reached European steppe, and at some stage they came back. Now, obviously, there will be some in the ancestral North Indian territory, that is north of Vindhya Parbat, you will find genetic identity similar to that of Western Asia, Central Asia, and Europe, or European steppe. Now the question is, if you are thinking what the Western scholars are thinking, that the entire migration was from west to east, in that case you have to explain that why in that case they should have brought a new genetic identity. You know, the higher caste people or Aryans who were only 5 to 7%, they should have brought a new genetic identity. That does not happen. It appears that the higher caste and the lower caste people are having this more or less same genetic identity. Essentially, the primary genetic identity is same with some degree of mutation. Now, that in fact confirms that if the higher caste and lower caste people were having have been found to have same genetic identity, that actually confirms that after you came back, you made them lower caste. But they were actually your ancestors.
Socially dominant.
That is why your genetic identity is same. Your genetic identity will match with your grandfather's genetic identity.
And another thing is that talking about the Fertile Crescent, that forms a part of Levo, the French name for Syria. What is being depicted ISIS, they basically says Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, and the name there is being depicted Islamic State of Iraq and Levo. Levo is the French coined name of that Fertile Crescent.
See, you are mixing the period. If you are talking about cradle of civilization, at that time Syria, Iraq, ISIS, all these names were not there. So let us say Mesopotamia and Sumer, you are talking about cradle of civilization, that was at that time named Mesopotamia and Sumer.
Exactly.
Yes. We can continue outside. What all questions you have?
Just on a lighter thank you, speaker. All of you enjoyed, looks like, because you're sitting here until the end and nobody left, and I noticed. So this must be a very good talk. You enjoyed, and we are happy that you enjoyed, and maybe we should hold some other talks like this.